Hi folks, I'm Hector Garcia, a CPA and a QuickBooks consultant. In this video, we're going to do a basic walkthrough of how multiple units of measure work in QuickBooks Desktop when it comes to managing inventory. So we're in QuickBooks Desktop now, and I'm actually using QuickBooks Desktop Premier Accountant Edition. Multiple units of measure, it's only available in the Premier Accountant and Enterprise Edition. So if you're working with QuickBooks Desktop Pro, this feature will not be there. And of course, if you're working with QuickBooks Online, this feature will absolutely not be there. So for QuickBooks Desktop users using Premier, Accountant, or Enterprise, this video will be helpful for you. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Edit menu, and then I'm going to go down to Preferences. I'm going to click on Preferences, go into Items and Inventory, going to Company Preferences, and then see here where it says Units of Measure. Right now, it's not enabled. Basically, when you create an item, it's just going to say quantity. It'll say a number next to it, and there will be no information next to it in terms of what that unit of measure happens to be. So I'm going to click OK. I'm not going to enable it yet, just so we can kind of walk through it. I'm going to click on the List menu and then click on Item List. In the item list, I'm going to go ahead and create a new inventory item. I'm going to click on the Item menu and then click on New. So I'm going to create a new inventory item. And just to simplify things, I'm going to create some avocados. We're going to buy them by the unit, and then we're also going to buy them by the box, and we're also going to buy them by the pallet, okay? That way we can kind of get an idea of how all the units of measure work. So we're going to call this one Has Avocado Medium, okay? Medium, probably the size, I don't know. Just making this up kind of as we go. I'm going to copy and paste the name into the description. And then in the cost, let's say this costs about 25 cents each. And we're talking about within the context of a unit. And the sales price, this one, let's say they're 50 cents each. Now, for every time you create an item, you need to have an income account. So I have my income account here. And I should also have a cost of goods sold account here somewhere in my chart of accounts. I'll pick my generic cost of goods sold account there. Then I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And that's it. I have my item created. If I right click on the item and click on Edit Item, I can go back to it. You see no reference to units of measure. There's a button here that says Unit of Measure Enable. If I click on that, it's going to open up the ability to turn on whether I want to use single units of measure or multiple. That screen that you're seeing here would be the same screen that you saw in the Preferences menu. So I wanted to kind of preface that and show you what the screen means and what the screen meant if you were in the Preferences menu. Same thing. If I turn it on through here, I'm going to universally turn on multiple units of measure for the entire QuickBooks file. I'm going to start with single. I'm going to select single and then click on Next. And then you will notice that it will ask me what is the unit of measure type. I'll select count because it's the one that makes the most sense. Each, box, case, whatever that is, and then click on Next. And then what is the current unit of measure? I'm going to select each, and I'm going to click on Finish, and that will create the unit of measure. You click on the drop-down menu. Notice that there isn't multiple at the moment. So this is basically using just one unit of measure. I'm going to click OK here for a second and close that, and then go back to the Edit menu, go back to Preferences, go into Items and Inventory, Company Preferences, and notice that single unit of measure is the one that's turned on. If I click on Disabled, I will remove all the unit of measure information from all the items. I don't want to do that. And if I switch to multiple, it will allow me to pick from multiple units of measure. I'm going to leave single for now. I'm going to click OK. And then double click again and Has Avocado or edit it. And then we're going to click on the drop-down menu and see what information we have here. What we essentially have is multiple ways to do units of measure. So for example, if I click on Add New, I can create a unit of measure that's actually weight or volume. For now, let's do volume. Let's say we're also going to sell some sort of liquid. Then I'm going to click on Next. Then it's going to ask me, what is your base unit of measure? Let's say that our base is going to be an ounce. Then we'll click on Finish. And then I'll click on No here for a second. And notice that I have both options here. I can choose whether or not I measure this by the ounce. Or let me just close this for a second. Or I can choose whether or not I do this by each. So I have multiple units of measure sets. There is just one unit of measure, and I can pick which item is going to pick which type of unit of measure. Yet we are not dealing with multiple units of measure within the context of one item being able to be measured in multiple ways. This is just choosing which is the standard unit of measure for this particular item. So I'm going to pick each on this one, then I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to do, let's say, orange juice. Simplify things here. So I'm going to have orange juice here, go to new, and then we're going to call this one pure OJ. And then let's say we have the unit of measure for this one would be an ounce. And let's say this is 1 cent an ounce and we sell it for 3 cents an ounce. I'm just using these weird examples. We don't, probably no one here is ever going to have orange juice as an inventory item, but I'm just kind of simplifying here everything. And then notice that this particular item gets the unit of measure ounces, and then the avocado gets on eaches. So before we get into the multiple stuff, let's go ahead and receive some of the inventory so we can look at it on reports and kind of get an idea for what it looks like when we have single units of measure turned on. So I'm going to go to enter bills here. I'm going to pick a vendor here at random, whichever vendor, and then we're going to go ahead and buy some avocados and some pure OJ. Now I'm going to go ahead and buy, let's say, 10,000 ounces of OJ, and then we'll buy 600 units of avocados. I'm going to hit save and close. Now that we have brought the inventory in through a bill, I can go to the reports menu, inventory, and then I can click on inventory valuation summary or inventory stock status by item. Either one will work. Let's start with stock status. I'll click on that and notice that I have my quantity on hand and I have the unit of measure next to it. Now, when we switch over to multiple units of measure, you will notice that the only the measure that you're going to see here is going to be the base unit of measure. That concept of the base unit of measure is extremely important because you will have multiple ways you can interact with that item in different units of measure. But when you run these reports, you're always going to see them at the base, and there's no way to flip it in this particular case. So that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing we got 600 of one and 10,000 of the other one at that 10,000 unit of measure, that 10,000 quantity, which is ounces for the OJ. But that's going to change when we do multiple. So let's close that and let's go and now set up multiple. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the edit menu, go into preferences, and then go back into that preferences and switch this to now multiple units of measure per item, and then click on OK. That will close all the screens, all the windows. I can click on my item list again, maximize it, and let's scroll down and go back to our Hass avocado again. And then notice that now this looks a little bit different. Now you're going to see sort of a little column here letting you know, hey, we have a multiple unit of measure situation and we can have multiple options. So in this case, we still have the same unit of measure sets, but within each set, you can edit the multiple measurements. So let's start with the each or the count-based unit of measure. We're going to click on edit, and now we're going to get a screen that's going to allow us to create the related units of measure to this each. So in this one where it says unit of measure set, we're just going to call this count because that's what we're doing. We're counting units, right? Something like that. And then on the other one, we'll call it weight or volume or whatever. That might be the easiest one. And then the related units of measure. So let's say we have a box of 12, and then we also have a pallet. So let's say that. So let's start with box of 12. Abbreviation. This is your own made up code. So I'm going to call it BX12. Maybe that's just something we understand internally. And then here it says number of each. It's how many of the each base unit of measure fit in a box of 12. Pretty obvious. We just put 12 in there. And then down here in the second line, we're going to do the pallet now. So let's say the pallet contains, just to simplify our life, 10 boxes, right? So that would be a pallet of 10 boxes. We'll call this one PAL. And then just to simplify things, 10 times 12 in this case would be 120. So I'm going to call it PAL 120 and then put here 120. So we have a pallet with 10 boxes that contain 120 units. And then we have a box of 12 that contains 12 units. Pretty simple math, should be pretty easy. Then it says here, what is the default unit? So within the context of buying it, how do we buy it? So let's say that we always buy them we always buy them by the pallet. So I'm gonna put that there. And also it looks like I misspelled pallet. So let me fix that. That's P-A-L-E-T. All right, cool. So that's fixed there. And then it says, okay, so within the context of purchases, we purchase them by the pallet. How do we sell them? So let's say we sell them by the box, right? So we sell them by the box, we purchase them by the pallet. Why do we count each? Well, maybe, when we break out a box, and sometimes in very rare circumstances, we sell them by the unit or we count them by the unit. That's why we have the base unit measure as each. However, generally speaking, your base unit measure should be the least or the smallest unit measure that you use to sell or purchase, depending on which one it is. And then at the end of the day, when you count them, you will count them within that context of the base unit measure. Now for shipping, this is what it will look like in a packing slip. So in here, I'm just going to use the same one that I have for selling, which would be the box of 12. Then I'm going to click on OK. So perfect. So I have my multiple units of measure set up. If I click on edit, I get to see all my different options. For the time being, QuickBooks is always going to measure in the context of your base unit measure, which is the first one I created, the each. And then I'm going to click on OK. Now let's go into the orange juice here. I'm going to double click on that. And I'm going to create multiple units of measure now for that set. So I'm going to click on edit. And then we're going to call this one volume. And then let's say that our related unit of measure in this case will be a liter. And the next one would be a gallon. So just to make sure that we know what that is, let me go into Google here. And then I'm just going to type in Google ounces to liters. Okay, and Google is pretty awesome like that. So we're going to do it. So how many, in this case, would be how many ounces would be in a liter. So in this case, I want to put 1 for a liter, and that would be 33.814 ounces. So very easy. I come in here and I put in, that would be here where it says number of fluid ounces. And then on abbreviation, we just call this one LT, simple. And then for gallon, I got to figure out how many ounces there are on a gallon. So we're going to come in here and then we'll change this to gallon. Or let's just Google that. Ounces to gallon conversion. So I love Google for this. And then we're going to do 1. And then there's 128 ounces. So we'll come in here and then we'll do here gallon and put 128 ounces. Pretty simple. Multiple units of measure for volume. So for purchases, let's say we buy them. Let's just say that we buy them by the gallon and we sell them by the liter. So I'm going to copy shipping, put liter there, and then click on OK. And then click on OK. So perfect. So now when I go sell it or buy it, watch this. So I'm going to go create, let's say, a bill. I'm going to go to enter bills. I'll pick any vendor here. Click on items. I select the item that I want to sell. Let's say I have pure OJ. By default, it shows up as a gallon because I told it that I wanted to buy it by default by the gallon. I can click on the drop down and I can still change it. So I can still either convert the number that's there to the ounces or the liter options, or I can just change it. So converting means, for example, I went ahead and I'm buying 50 gallons. And then I say, you know what? I know 50 gallons is what I'm buying, but I want to see it in ounces. So when I click on the drop-down menu, I need to click on convert, click there, convert, and then QuickBooks will now show it in ounces and then show the units of measure as ounces. If by any chance I type in 100 ounces and what I really wanted is to put 100 gallons, I say, whoops, I made a mistake. I'll click on the drop-down and say change. So change is different than convert. Convert means the number I put is correct, and now I want to just change the unit of measure and have QuickBooks recalculate it. So the other option here that says change is when I put the number, the original unit of measure was wrong, and now I just want to keep the number and change the unit of measure without making any calculations. So it depends really on what you're trying to achieve. So bringing in 100 gallons is the equivalent of bringing 128 ounces in this particular case. So let's bring in the other product, the avocados, and this is by the pallet. So you notice right there, it's by the pallet. If I put 80 and I wanted to buy 80 boxes, not 80 pallets, and the system already made the calculation, I just go to change to the boxes, and then QuickBooks will recalculate the price or the cost. Then I click on save and close, and perfect. I'm gonna go back to reports, go to inventory, and then go inventory stock status by item. And I wanna show you the one really important thing, that although I was working with multiple units of measure examples, QuickBooks will always, especially in the reports, resort to the base unit of measure. Unfortunately, there isn't a magic button I can press here and say, hey, show me the inventory in an alternative unit of measure. That would be nice. But as of QuickBooks 2021, which is the version I'm using to record this video, that option is not there. But it would be wonderful indeed if that existed. Anyway, so that was because the base unit of measure was the one that we put. Now I'm going to create another scenario in which the base unit of measure is not necessarily the smallest one, it's somewhere in the middle. So I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to go to list and go to item list. And then I'm going to create a new item. So go to item, new item. And let's say we're buying some sort of, let's call it some sort of wood material that we can buy it in different lengths. So I'm going to go inventory part. We're going to call this wood. Just going to simplify my life here. And then we're going to go from inches to meters. Okay. So let's say, for example, that we have inches, we have meters, and then we have feet. Let's just simplify our life like that. So we have inches, feet, and meters, the three potential units of measure. So I'm going to start with feet. Even though I went inches to meters, I'm actually going to start with feet. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to create a new unit of measure. I'm going to go to new. So add new. And then it's asking me what type is this. I'm going to click on length. Then I'm going to click on next. And let's say my base unit of measure in this case is foot. But in some cases, I may be using inches or meters in this case. So I'm going to click on next. And then by default, when you start with this module, QuickBooks will actually give you some suggestions and say, hey, would you like to use any of these suggestions? So the answer is yes, I want to use meter, but I also want to add one more, which in this case was going to be inches. So I'm going to put the inches, put IN, and I yet know what the inches per feet are. So I want to go back into my Magic Google here, and then I'll do inches to feet. And then it says here that every 1 inch is 0.08 of a foot, right? So that's how I want to do it. 1 inch is 0.08333 of a foot. So because I set up my feet as my base unit of measure, and in this case, this unit of measure or this alternative unit of measure is actually smaller than that, you will see decimals instead of positive numbers. Now there's a maximum of 5 decimals. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So maximum of 5 decimals. So QuickBooks will be kind of precise. You know, you will have some issues with really, really small units of measure in which you need more than 5 digits in terms of decimals. So I'm going to click on next, click on yes. Then it says, what is your default unit of measure for purchasing? So let's say I buy these by the meters. Let's just say that, but I sell them by the inch. So why would I do something like this where I buy them by the meter and sell them by the inch, but somehow I use foot as my base unit of measure? That's because when I count them, when I store them by the foot. So that's something to really think about. You know, you have to think about what is the unit of measure that I'm going to count on. I'm going to go to the warehouse, count how many I have in stock, and have my inventory control. That's going to be by the feet because for whatever reason, that's what we want to choose. But our vendors, we buy from Europe and they sell by the meter. And what we sell is little tiny units, which we sell them by the inches. So that's when you would see something crazy like that, where you would have 3 different units of measure, your base for counting, your sales, and your purchase. So I'm going to click on next, and I'm just going to call this length. I don't have to put anything else on that. And then click on finish. And now just in case you're confused about that screen looking different, I'm going to click here and edit so we can see the same screen that we're used to seeing. That was just, you know, the screen that pops up when you first create the unit of measure. Here is actually a pretty similar screen that we were using earlier. So you get to see how many feet are there in a meter and then how many inches are there in a foot. Okay, that's basically what all this stuff means. So we click OK. So let's say that my cost per feet, and I'm going to have to do a conversion because let's say my cost per meter is, let's say, $5. So I would need to know what my cost per feet is, and I might need to do this calculation manually because I know from my vendor that I pay $5 a meter, for example, but I decided to use feet as my unit of measure. So I would have to know what the division is. So the division here is 3.28084, right? I would have to then divide that by the $5. So we start with $5 a meter divided by that number. 3 point, I forgot what it was. What is it again? 3.28084. So we'll do 5 divided by 3.28084 tab, and this is effectively my cost per foot. You will see how this calculates pretty easily once we start doing the purchasing of it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my income account, then click on OK. So again, we decided to use feet as the unit of measure. I'm going to close this and then create a new purchase order. So I'm going to go into vendors and click on create purchase order, similar to doing a bill. Maximize that, pick a vendor here at random. On the item, we're going to go ahead and pick that wood item. And then my default unit of measure that I buy is per meter. And then notice that my rate is $5, even though I never put $5 anywhere. If I were to switch that and convert that one into feet, notice that it will make the calculation and multiply the 1.52, in this case, feet, 1.52 cost per foot times this quantity. So that's actually pretty cool how you kind of see this into effect. But again, we buy this by the meter. So I'm going to convert this back to a meter. And let's say we're going to buy 90 meters worth. And then we're going to click on save and close. And then we'll go ahead and receive that. Go to vendors, enter bills, select my vendor here, click on yes, go ahead and receive the purchase order. So we're doing an extra step, but that's okay. Then click on save and close. Then I can go back to reports, inventory stock status by item, and then maximize that. And we can see that we have 295.28 feet of that product. Again, it's supposed to be meters. If I double click on that and I look at my transaction, it shows in meters because that was the original unit measure for the transaction, but QuickBooks will calculate and revert back to the base unit measure all the time. That's how QuickBooks is designed. There's no other way to show it on this screen at a different calculated unit measure. It will always revert back to base. Now I'm going to close that and then I'm going to sell some. So I'm going to go to customers, go to create invoice, just so we can see the application of this on the sales side. I'll pick a customer here at random, and then I'm going to start with wood. And then you're going to notice that wood automatically shows up in inches. I'm going to go ahead and sell, let's say, where's my quantity? Let's say 80 inches. And the price is at 0 because I didn't set the price originally. That was my fault. Let me clear that, go back into the item list and set that in there. So we're going to go back to wood. Double click on that to edit. And then let's say the sales price in this case, let's just say the sales price in this case is $1 per inch. Simplify our life, $1 per inch. So how would we know what a sales price per foot is? Well, we would just have to do the calculation, right? So in this case, I would have to multiply by how many inches are in a foot, which we know that that's 12, right? So we're going to multiply that 1 times 12. So it's $12 a foot or $1 per inch. Let's just double check, make sure that we haven't confused ourselves here. 1 feet is 12 inches, right? Everybody should know that, but just going back to Google so we can make our calculation. So as long as I multiply the price per inch times how many inches are in a foot, I'll know what my sales price is per foot. Again, QuickBooks is using feet as the base unit of measure, which means I have to convert my price to the base unit of measure, even though, I guess I'm going to go back to my invoice here, even though I never sell by the foot, right? So I can pick my item here, wood, and let's say I'm going to sell 17 inches, right? It defaults in inches, and here's my price each. Now, because QuickBooks is not perfect with the calculations, notice it did a really strange calculation here. That price really should have been a 1. I don't know why it did that. That's a really curious thing, why this would do 0.999996 instead of doing a 1. I'm going to go back to that in a second just to see what am I doing wrong here. This is normal, $12 a foot. So who knows why in the heck that happened. Possibly, I'm going to click on edit here, possibly because of the rounding error. I'm going to put a 4 here at the end, see if it makes any difference, although it's actually not mathematically correct. I'm going to click OK and OK and see if it makes any difference. This is at this point just for fun. Let's pick our customer again and let's pick our item and let's do here 17. Notice that it rounds up a little bit. So this is what I meant earlier by QuickBooks is fairly precise, but having those 5 decimals only could cause this really weird, quirky thing where you would have really sort of, again, really small number because of that level of error that will show up in here. And again, you can override it, just put a straight 1 there, and it'll be much easier for you. But remember that QuickBooks is continually calculating that price for you. If I click on the drop-down menu here, you can see what the original calculation is that I overrid, which is fine, but just keep that in mind. Be very cognizant of that you could be overriding those things and making small changes, and also be hyper aware that your multiple units of measure could have that small margin of error. So anyway, I mean, there's tons to learn about how this applies in the real world, especially when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to inventory management, when it comes to wholesale. But before you embark in your multiple units of measure journey, I feel that this particular lesson was really important for that. Anyway, hope you like it, and I'll see you in the next one.